Okay, let's dive into this because 1.7 million is an absolutely staggering statistic. I mean, think about it. That is the number of adult sepsis cases that happen every single year in the United States alone. And tragically, out of those 1.7 million, about 270,000 result in death. Sepsis is this incredibly complex, difficult global health crisis. And what's wild is that it often flies completely under the radar until it's just way too late. So today, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the fascinating science of how medical professionals are fighting back, armed with brand new data and some seriously powerful diagnostic tools. If you've ever walked through the sterile, high-stakes environment of a hospital intensive care unit, well, you've seen the battleground firsthand. You see, sepsis isn't just one single disease. It's a massive clinical syndrome, and it acts like this silent, shape-shifting killer because, terrifyingly, there's no single confirmatory diagnostic test for it. Figuring it out and treating it requires intense clinical judgment, a super rapid synthesis of infection clues, and signs of organ dysfunction. The clock is literally always ticking. So, we're looking at the sepsis investigation, from national surveillance to bedside survival. We're unraveling a dual challenge today. First, the macro level. How do we actually track this syndrome nationally to understand the real public health burden? And second, the micro level. When a patient is crashing right in front of a doctor, how can we rapidly predict their survival chances to give the right care immediately? So, the crucial point is we have to know exactly what it is we're fighting. Back in 2016, a medical task force released the Sepsis 3 criteria to keep up with our advancing understanding of the pathobiology. They defined it as a life-threatening organ dysfunction caused by a dysregulated host response to infection. Put simply, it's not just the infection itself doing the damage. It's the patient's own body completely overreacting to that infection, spiraling out of control, and ultimately shutting down vital organs. Now, what's really interesting about this is that fundamentally, we used to get the macro tracking of this whole syndrome completely wrong. For years, national estimates relied on administrative and billing codes, but the data started showing something totally bizarre. Sepsis incidence was apparently going up, but mortality was going down, while the actual underlying infections stayed exactly the same. Why? Coding bias and financial incentives. Hospitals literally got higher reimbursement for sepsis coding. It was totally unreliable. So the CDC stepped in with a revolutionary new standard, recommending objective clinical data pulled straight from electronic health records. This strips away all that bias and finally gives us a true, accurate picture of the public health burden. Let's move to the front lines and see how this builds, because having accurate national data, that's really only half the battle. It doesn't instantly help the doctor standing next to a crashing patient. We have to shift our focus from that high-level national surveillance straight down to the crucial microscopic bedside battle. Because once we've identified sepsis, how do we know exactly how severe it is? How do we predict the outcome so we can allocate those life-saving resources where they're needed most? This brings us to our very first crucial bedside clue, blood lactate. Lactate is a byproduct your body produces when it has to scramble to generate energy without enough oxygen, which is a state known as anaerobic metabolism. In sepsis, high lactate indicates dangerous tissue hypoperfusion. Essentially, your tissues and cells are starving for oxygen. It's a terrifying tipping point. Studies show that when lactate levels rise above 2 millimoles per liter, that's a severe warning sign. But if it climbs above 4? In a recent cross-sectional study of 200 patients, nearly 95% of people who crossed that 4 millimoles threshold did not survive. It acts as a really profound mirror, reflecting deep metabolic derangement. But luckily, lactate isn't our only weapon. Enter serum procalcitonin, or PCT. This is an absolutely fascinating biomarker. It's a precursor of calcitonin, and it's released by cells specifically during an inflammatory response to a bacterial infection. This makes it an incredibly powerful beacon for doctors. Why? Because it helps them actually distinguish bacterial sepsis from other types of systemic inflammation. It tells them exactly when and how to deploy targeted antibiotic therapies. And just like lactate, rising PCT levels correlate directly with the severity of organ dysfunction and the risk of death. So researchers asked a pretty genius question. What if we combine these powerful biomarkers with the standard vital signs we already track every day? That exact thought led to the creation of the LP News Score. It is an elegantly simple 3-step solution. Step 1, measure the blood lactate. Step 2, measure the serum procalcitonin. Step 3, add those results to the patient's National Early Warning Score, or NEWS, which already tracks 7 standard vital parameters like temperature, heart rate, and oxygen saturation. By integrating the biochemical data with the physiological data, they created this incredibly comprehensive, real-time snapshot of the patient's condition.
And the power of this combination brilliantly illustrates itself when you compare survivors to non-survivors. In that 200-patient study, the survivors had a mean lactate of 2.12 and a PCT of 11.27. But for the non-survivors, their lactate was at 3.30 and their PCT absolutely skyrocketed to 30.04. The biochemical differences between living and dying are stark. They are measurable and they are undeniable. We aren't doing guesswork anymore. This is objective data revealing the raw severity of the syndrome in real time.
When you plug all this data into the LP News scoring system, the results are remarkably, almost chillingly precise. In that same study cohort, researchers tracked mortality outcomes based on the final score. And they found a definitive line in the sand. When a patient's LP News score exceeded 16, the 14-day mortality rate reached an absolute 100%. Every single patient, having a score that can map clinical deterioration with that level of definitive certainty, that is an unparalleled tool for a critical care team trying to decide exactly how aggressively they need to intervene. But you might be wondering, don't hospitals already have scoring systems for this? Well, yes, they do. The traditional gold standards are the Apache 2 and SOFA scoring systems. But when you compare their diagnostic accuracy, where a perfect score is 1.0, the results are crystal clear. The traditional SOFA score sits at 0.882. Apache 2 is at 0.914, but the new LP News model, it absolutely crushes them with a 0.966 diagnostic accuracy. It isn't just a little bit better, it vastly outperforms these highly complex, older models in accurately predicting 14-day mortality. So what does this all mean for us? Why does this specific scoring system matter so much? Because LP News is a genuine medical breakthrough. First off, it's an independent mortality predictor, holding an odds ratio of 3.12. Second, at a cutoff score of just over 11, it boasts an impressive 96.9% sensitivity for predicting mortality. And honestly, most importantly, it takes prognostication out of the complex, time-consuming laboratory and brings it right to the bedside. It uses 2 easily accessible blood tests combined with standard vital signs. That means it's highly sensitive, super accessible, and perfectly designed for high-stress critical care workflows. This brings us right back to the human element of critical care. The doctors, the nurses, the medical professionals who are operating in incredibly resource-constrained environments where literally every single second counts. By moving away from flawed billing codes for tracking and moving away from overly complex algorithms for treating, we're entering a totally new era. Objective, rapid data like the LP News score saves crucial time. It allows a physician to look at a patient, calculate a simple combined score, and instantly know the severity of the invisible storm raging inside their body. We started off talking about 1.7 million cases and 270,000 deaths. We've seen how objective electronic records are fixing our national surveillance, and how integrating lactate and procalcitonin with vital signs is completely revolutionizing bedside prediction. And it leaves us with one incredibly provocative thought to ponder. As this highly effective, simplified scoring system rolls out across the world, how many lives could we save globally simply by shifting the ultimate prognostic power directly from the laboratory to the patient's bedside? It's an exciting frontier in critical care for sure, and one that gives us a whole lot of hope in the fight against sepsis.